Day 28. We're getting ready to get started. It's warm today and the sun is out, but it's actually only 86, so it's not horribly hot. I'm excited to get this done now. It's supposed to get a lot warmer a little later. It's supposed to be like 106 today, which in reality it feels like 110 when it's 106. But anyway, we're gonna get started right now. I'll see you in a little bit. Day 28, guys, is completed and done. Super excited to say that. You know, I always share a little bit about how I'm feeling when I'm about to go on these runs, or, you know, the internal dialogue that's taking effect in my head. And, you know, I woke up this morning and I went to go put on my running shoes, and my legs just felt really tired, like tight. They just felt really tight. I stretched a little bit before I took off, but it was a little harder to run today. Just my legs just weren't feeling it. But I pushed myself to run just a little under 2 miles today. I only did 1.91 miles. And then I realized that it's probably because I did a really long run. I pushed myself yesterday and I ran the full 3 miles, which was really a big surprise because I didn't think I was going to get past. I was only supposed to increase 1 mile, and I actually increased 1.5 miles. So, you know, there's something to be said about recovery. And even though I want to run consistently every single day, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm risking injury. So that's really important that I touch on that. This challenge, if you're doing a physical challenge, whether it's doing 50 push-ups a day or 10 push-ups a day or running a block a day or whatever it is, you also have to check in with yourself. Not everybody's the same, first and foremost. Everybody's body's a little bit different. Number two, you know, I talk about Goggin and how incredible he is and how he does all these crazy things, and it makes you think like, well, if he's running on broken legs and he's doing SEAL training 3 times and he's jumping out of helicopters to put out fires and doing Superman stuff, then why am I complaining about the weather? And although I find it inspiring and motivating to get me to push a little farther, you know, I also said in a series of videos several times that I'm not Goggin, and I'm not trying to be Goggin. I'm just a guy trying to become a little bit more health conscious and have a little bit of a longer life so that I'm here when my daughter needs me, you know, as long as I possibly can. And I don't want to be a dependent to her. I want to be here to support her. I want to be here, but I want to be functional and in good spirits, right? So I think it's really important to understand that your body might be different than mine. And even though maybe you're the same age as me, or maybe you're a little older or a little younger, your body might be different than mine, and your recovery is something that you shouldn't ignore. You have to check in with yourself, but also be mindful that your mind is going to play games with you. Your mind is going to tell you that, you know, you have to understand that, like, figure out the game that your mind is playing, because your mind is going to try to tell you that you need to recover, that you need to rest, you need to take a day off, you know, you've done enough, why are you out here? And all this internal dialogue was going on in my head this morning, you know? So you have to really kind of be mindful that you do need to recover, and you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. But do it while also being aware that your mind is also lying to you. So you have to kind of navigate through the deceitful, tactical way that your mind is trying to control you from pushing yourself to your full potential. That was the dialogue I was having today. How much of this is real and how much of this is just my mind trying to get me to stop from pushing myself to my potential? So I could have stopped at 1 mile. I could have stopped at 1.5 miles. I pushed myself and I said, no, you know, I'm gonna try to do at least 2 miles. I didn't quite get to the 2 miles. I actually thought I was at 2 miles, and I stopped, and then I realized that I missed it by a tenth. I was just a little shy of the 2 miles, which is okay. I got a good run, and you know, like I said, recovery is important. You have to pay attention to it. I did run a lot yesterday and pushed myself quite a bit yesterday, so you just have to be mindful, you know. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, you know, is, I wanted to share with you that sometimes I share things, you know, and I share conversations that I have with people, or I share, you know, obviously I don't tell you guys who those people are because it doesn't matter. The points are what the conversation was about and how some people think or the things that they're going through. And I share some of that stuff with you guys. And, you know, anytime that I ever share anything like that, it's not, I want to be clear that it's never a criticism. We are all guilty of some of it, you know? It's not like I've never made decisions because of somebody's expectation and I'm perfect. That's just absurd. If you were thinking at any moment that, wow, this is kind of weird that he shares these stories as if that could never happen to him. Oh man, it's happened to me. I have made decisions because of someone's expectation or because of someone's opinion. And every time that I've done that, by the way, I always kick myself in the butt. You know? Recently, that particular message has been so predominant to me, though. I have made some really bad decisions. And it has caused a lot of headaches. You know, it's just caused a lot of headaches. A lot of stressful moments because I made decisions that were not what I wanted to do. But I was basing those decisions on information that was given to me, whether it was an expectation or an advice or, you know, some perspective that was shared with me. And whoever shared that perspective, first and foremost, they're not responsible for my decision. That's something that's also very important to understand, is that when you're making decisions because somebody tells you that you should go get your x-ray certification so that you can do x-rays at a hospital, and then you hate your life because you're doing x-rays at a hospital, that person that gave you the advice is not to blame. They just gave you advice based on their inability to see your vision. You are responsible for your own decisions. I am responsible for my decisions. However stressful, however painful the outcome may be, whether I made that decision based on somebody's perspective or somebody's advice, the decision was still ultimately made by me. Only I could be responsible for the outcome. That's why it's so important to really kind of dissect when people give you perspective or advice, and really get a good understanding of, is this advice really what I need to be doing? Sometimes you have to logically think, not just logically, but you have to connect heart and mind, you know, because sometimes the decision, the logical portion of the decision all makes sense, but if your heart is not in it, then that outcome will not be the same. Because you have to align yourself. You can't be halfway in. You can't be thinking, oh yeah, I need to do this class because logically it makes sense, but I absolutely hate this material. I don't want to do it. I can't stand being in this classroom. I really want to be doing something else with my life, because then what happens is, even if you do get through that course, even if you do get that job, even if you are working in that field, eventually you find yourself realizing how miserable you are. When I was in my 20s, I had a course in college where I was about 22, maybe 21, where the instructor talked a lot about how one of the reasons why there's a such thing as a midlife crisis, one of the biggest contributors to a midlife crisis, is that people find themselves in a career or in a life that they never wanted. And so a lot of times these individuals that, they became an engineer because my dad was an engineer, and they became a doctor because my dad and my grandpa, they were doctors, and so I just follow that family tradition or whatever, and they ignore their heart. They ignore that maybe they wanted to get a degree in psychology and become a psychiatrist, or maybe they wanted to get a degree in finance and become a banker, or their passion was somewhere else, their heart was somewhere else, and they followed family tradition and went into a different kind of career, and they find themselves in this career and they ignored their heart for so long that now all of a sudden they're 45 years old. They're in a marriage that they didn't even know that they wanted to be in. They just got married because of the expectation of their families, and then they have a family that they didn't really see themselves in, and so they have a breakdown. And in some extreme cases, you hear of cases where it's like, yeah, he went to the store to get cigarettes and he never came back, and now we heard he was in climbing the Himalaya mountains or something crazy, right? He walked out on his job and he disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to him. And then we got a postcard years later that he's been, backpacking through Europe or something. Sometimes people have these breakdowns because they ignore what's here, right? And I think that's really important. When we take on people's advice, when you go to somebody, for example, I mentioned how I used to go to my mom all the time, and I would ask her I would just simply kind of just talk to her about stuff that I was going through, and she would ask me questions, and somehow in the questions I would find the answers, and then I would be like, "Mom, you're a genius, thank you." And half the time I don't even know if some of the stuff that I was asking her about, if she even understood. But somehow she had these she had this way of navigating me to where I needed to go to, and things just kind of made sense. So sometimes you really kind of it's impossible to go through your life without ever taking advice from anybody, right? And it may not even be a healthy thing. I mean, it's really good to get perspective. There's that whole thing about 10 heads are better than one, right? Sometimes 10 heads looking at a problem, it's a lot easier to solve the problem if you got a lot of different perspective. Every mind works different. My mom used to say every single mind is a different world with a different perspective. And so having 10 people looking at the same problem generally turns out to be a good thing. So as humans, it's really important to surround ourselves with people that can look at things and kind of give us perspective. But if the perspective that you're getting or the advice that you're getting doesn't align with you logically, and it doesn't align with your heart, then it cannot be correct for you. The perspective or the advice that you get, when it aligns with your mind and you logically see the outcome and you go, yes, that's the right path, it makes sense to me logically, and your heart goes, Yay! I'm so happy because we get to do what we wanted to do. We figured out a way to make that work. Well, then the advice is probably the better advice, right? Sometimes people give you advice I mentioned this. Sometimes people give you advice based on the fear that they feel of you failing because they cannot see the outcome of the vision that you're seeing. They can't see your vision. And so they give you advice based on their fears. They don't mean to not sound supportive. They're giving you that advice because they care about you. They don't want to see you fail. But at the same time, they're giving you the safety net. You know, you should really be paying attention or doing this. You should really be paying attention to this or doing this. Instead of, chasing this. I hate people that tell me chasing that pie in the sky, for example. Right? Look, man, if nobody chased the pie in the sky, the world would be a really, really dull place. If everybody was playing it safe, the world would be a very dull place. Think about it. Actors, they pack their bag from Wyoming or Iowa or wherever. And they travel thousands of miles with a suitcase and they land in places like New York and LA. And they know that they have a 1 in a 10 million chance of making it. Jim Carrey's story is absolutely amazing. I mean, he landed with a guitar case and a duffel bag in Hollywood. You know? And had he not believed in the pie in the sky, we wouldn't have his movies. We wouldn't be able to see his amazing speeches on YouTube. He wouldn't be Jim Carrey. And like him, there is thousands and thousands of actors, and every time you hear their story and you hear about their early humble beginnings and how they traveled across the country, landed in places like Hollywood, slept in the crappiest hotels for the first weeks that they were there until they found a place where they could have a roommate, and they shared an apartment with some people, and they, one person that comes to mind is Clint Eastwood. I mean, Clint Eastwood actually slept in the steps of a theater school. He was homeless. But he wanted to go to this theater school, and so he slept on the steps. And that's where he started. That's where he started. I think it's called the Playhouse. They believed in the pie in the sky. I'm sure Jim Carrey and a lot of these guys that had humble beginnings like that, they saw a vision. They saw themselves going somewhere. And I am sure that there was thousands of people around them that told them how they were chasing this pie in the sky. They weren't doing it because they didn't want to see Jim Carrey be successful. Maybe they were doing it because they loved Jim Carrey and they didn't want him to this was a crazy thing that he was going to do. And he could fail. But I guarantee you that everyone that told Jim Carrey not to go to Hollywood, that advice didn't align with his logic and his heart. Logically made a lot of sense. Maybe he was like, I'm here, I know people, I have family around, maybe I have friends, maybe I'm doing some super cool little, comedy skit in a local club, but that wasn't enough. Right? So I think it's important to really understand that advice comes from a perspective that's not yours. And more importantly, I want you guys to understand that when I share a lot of this stuff, I have made choices. I have made choices that have cost me. I have made choices because I felt compelled to somebody's expectation, and they have been the choices that I regret the most. I have made choices that have put me in financial situations based on somebody's perception of something. And those are the choices that I have regretted the most. Right? So it's not about, my thoughts are not about me being perfect. I share some of the stories that I have, conversations that I have with people, or I share some of the things or perception that I have about certain things. I share those things because I have also lived through them. That's it. I have lived through them. And in some cases, I've regretted them. And when it comes to advice, it's very rare that I follow an advice that doesn't align with my heart and my mind. Where it's logical, but I know in the heart of hearts that I don't really want to do this, but it's logical. And then I do it. And 9 times out of 10, whenever I've done that, I regret it. I regret it every single time. Sometimes though, the advice aligns. Click. It's like a little puzzle. It's like logically it makes sense, and wholeheartedly I'm excited about it. Boom, those are the best advices ever. Those are the ones that really come together. And although you can take perspective from somebody else, and it's not that you're discarding their advice, it's good advice. It's good to consider and maybe take elements of that advice. Maybe the whole advice doesn't make sense, but maybe there's a little part in that advice where you go, I didn't think about that. Okay, let me kind of implement that to what my game plan is, and kind of puzzle piece it in my big puzzle and see how that turns out. Don't be afraid of your own person. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to take action based on your idea. My mom used to always tell me, don't be afraid to be you. I'll leave you guys with that. Don't be afraid to be you. Have a wonderful day. One less day to go in this 365-day challenge. Super excited. Take care.